Saturn Devouring His Son. The canvas erupts with violence and dread. Saturn, the ancient Titan, is caught in the act of consuming his own child. Painted by Francisco Goya in the twilight of his life, Saturn Devouring His Son stands as a monument to horror, myth, and psychological torment. The scene is stripped of any mythic grandeur. Instead, Saturn is rendered as a wild, almost feral being, hunched over the limp corpse of his offspring. In a swirl of shadow and flesh, Goya plunges us into the darkest recesses of fear and madness. The palette is muddy, heavy with blacks and browns, the brushstrokes almost reckless, as if the painting itself was born from delirium. So visceral is the image that the viewer can almost hear the ragged breath of the god, sense the chill of the shadowy void that envelops the figures. The child's body is pale and contorted, reduced to a gruesome offering in the Titan's desperate bid for survival. There is no escape from this nightmare. The viewer is forced to witness the unthinkable, to reckon with the rawest expressions of human and inhuman terror. Saturn's haunting expression. Saturn's face is a mask of frenzied madness. Goya draws us in with those bulging, bloodshot eyes, fixed in an unblinking stare that seems to pierce the darkness. The eyes are not merely terrified, they are desperate, rimmed with a white so stark it glows against the blackness, as if lit by some internal, unquenchable fire. His mouth gapes wide, teeth bared, lips drawn back in a snarl of hunger and agony. The mouth is not the triumphant maw of a victorious god, but a chasm, a symbol of endless appetite and bottomless dread. Every muscle in Saturn's face is contorted, veins standing out, forehead slick with sweat, as if the act of devouring costs him every shred of his sanity. Goya's rough, hurried brushwork amplifies the sense of panic, the streaks of pigment echoing the chaos in Saturn's mind. The Titan is both predator and victim, consumed by the very terror he enacts. The child's lifeless body, against Saturn's monstrous form, lies the limp, pitiful body of his child. Goya denies the child any hint of mythic invulnerability. Instead, the figure is small, naked, and appallingly human. The skin is waxen, drained of life, rendered in ashen tones that catch the faintest light, emphasizing its frailty. The child's back is arched unnaturally, head thrown back, arms dangling uselessly, legs gripped in Saturn's fist. There is no resistance, no trace of divinity, only the silent testament to a brutal fate. The contrast between the child's delicate flesh and Saturn's rough, soiled hands is stark, the violence of the act laid bare. Goya's unflinching honesty in exposing the child's vulnerability transforms the myth from legend to tragedy, inviting the viewer to mourn not just for the victim, but for the universal horror of innocence destroyed by fear. The brutality of hands. Saturn's hands emerge from the murk, gnarled and sinewy, gripping the child with a force that is both literal and symbolic. The knuckles are swollen, veins crawling atop the mottled skin, the nails dark and dirty. Goya paints these hands as instruments of utter destruction, more beastly than human. They clutch the child's torso and thighs with a ferocity that speaks to Saturn's desperation, the fingers digging deep into flesh. The hands act as visual anchors for the painting's violence, channeling the Titan's terror into physical form. They're the embodiment of control gone mad, of power so absolute that it annihilates even its own progeny. The brushwork here is particularly raw. Each stroke seems to shudder with energy, echoing the trembling of Saturn's grip. In these hands, Goya gives shape to the myth's core, the devastation wrought by fear, the cost of unchecked authority. Darkness enveloping the scene. All around Saturn and his victim, darkness presses in. The background is a void, almost impenetrable, swallowing any hint of context or escape. Goya surrounds the central figures with a dense, oily black, isolating them in a space that feels claustrophobic and inescapable. The effect is both theatrical and psychological. Everything outside the horrific act dissolves into shadow, forcing the viewer's attention onto the intimate terror at the heart of the painting. The darkness is more than a backdrop. It is the visual manifestation of Saturn's paranoia, the abyss of his own making. It snuffs out hope, mercy, even the possibility of redemption. The figures, lit by a ghastly, uncertain glow, seem to hover on the edge of reality, as if suspended between nightmare and waking. In this way, Goya turns darkness itself into a force, a participant in the tragedy unfolding on the canvas. The myth behind the horror. The brutality of the image takes on deeper meaning when one recalls the ancient myth. Saturn, known as Cronus to the Greeks, is fated to be overthrown by his own child. Driven by the terror of losing power, he devours each newborn in a futile attempt to outwit destiny. Goya rejects any sanitized retelling. There are no heroics, no gods in shining armor, only the stark, pitiless consequences of fear. The myth becomes a tale of cyclical violence, a father destroying his children to avoid his own destruction, perpetuating an endless loop of suffering. By focusing on the moment of consumption, Goya strips the story to its existential core. The painting becomes a meditation on the destructive nature of power, the madness that can consume those who fear its loss, and the terrible costs paid by the innocent. Saturn Devouring His Son is the product of Goya's final, most haunted years, a time marked by political upheaval, illness, and personal despair. The work is part of his Black Paintings, a series executed directly onto the walls of his house, never intended for public display. Goya's palette turns almost exclusively to black, ochre, and sickly flesh tones. His brushwork grows agitated, restless, raw. The subject matter becomes increasingly bleak, peopled by specters, demons, and madmen. In these paintings, Goya abandons all pretense of courtly elegance or optimism. Instead, he exposes his innermost fears, his vision of a world unraveling. Saturn Devouring His Son stands as the most visceral expression of this period, a howl of anguish, a warning against the darkness lurking in power and the human mind. Legacy of the Nightmarish Titan. The impact of Goya's Saturn resonates far beyond the walls where it was painted. Its nightmarish vision continues to unsettle and fascinate, influencing artists and writers who grapple with the shadowy depths of human nature. The painting has become an icon of psychological horror, cited in explorations of madness, violence, and the destructive potential of fear. It stands as a stark challenge to viewers to look, unflinching, at the darkness within stories and within ourselves. Goya transformed an ancient myth into a universal meditation on the consequences of unchecked power and the horrors it can unleash. In its terror and its artistry, Saturn Devouring His Son remains one of art's most unforgettable images. A haunting reminder of the fragile boundaries between reason and madness, love and destruction, the mortal and the divine.